Um, I'll get into sort of what you want to write about in just a second. So there are basically two parts to this digital literacy narrative, and they're different, right? So you're going to basically think about it as two papers you're putting together, like just literally one and then another one. So the first part one, is actual narrative, meaning it's a story that you tell about yourself and you encountering and learning and figuring out some aspect of the digital world, right? And there's a bunch of questions. I should be able to do that, right? What obstacles? So here's some questions, right? And this is just for to get your mind going, right? So you have, what obstacles have you encountered and overcome and learned to engage? One of the things you do want to think about is that a narrative is a story, but when we make it an essay or an actual short story, something has to happen. So it's usually the character changes. So in this case, you change. You saw the world one way, meaning you thought about things were like this. You have an experience, and then you shift. Right? Doesn't have to be huge. Doesn't have to be like, don't believe in God, had an experience, now I believe in God. It can just be very small. Like, I thought about communication this way. Like, I thought you could only do this with communication. I learned this whole other process, and now I understand communication slightly differently, right? So anyway, you want to have that in the back of your mind when you're trying to pick a specific event. So what are some of your vivid memories where you attempt to engage with some aspect of the digital landscape? Unexpected problems. So conflicts are always great for narratives. What issues have arisen from posting content on social media? Researching for information. Like, so there's any aspect of your interaction with the digital world, right? Who has helped or hindered your development? And then these are a bunch of quick ones. Do you remember your first encounter with Instagram? Do you tweet? What do you love about Twitter? Whose tweets do you follow? Whose blogs do you have? Your own blog? If blogs might be on their way back, I think that's which is good. So just keep that there. When and how did you first learn to text? Do you always know IM abbreviations? This is the English dean. She thinks this is so. Does it shock you to find that this question? Because you could talk about that, right? You could talk about learning text speak, like, and what that's about, and how that changes the way you think about language. At least it did for me. In any event, so that's the 2 to 3 pages. It's a story from your life, personal essay, in which you change because you went through some experience having to do with the digital world. The second part of the essay is 2 pages, and it's an analysis of your story that you told. So you told the whole story about how something changed, and you came to understand some digital thing. Or how to use, or what Instagram could do, or how now people make money. Like, you learn something, okay. And then you're going to then sort of look at it objectively and try to analyze it using the definition that they give us, right? So they've given us this definition of digital literacy, which is what I put here. And you're going to go ahead and try to make connections, right? So here, when the definition says this, here's where I show that in my essay and what I mean by that. All right, so basic overview. A digital literacy narrative uses the elements of story, right? Plot, character, setting, conflict, to recount a writer's personal experience with language in all its forms, reading and writing, acquiring a second language, being an insider or outsider, based on literacy level, and so on. So remember, literacy narratives have existed for a very long time. People tell stories about how they learn to read and change their life and so on. So this is the same thing, but it's about reading like computers, like reading technology. It's a different concept of like what reading actually means. Right? Instead of actual just words we read and get information, now we like see things, and we know certain informations from symbols. We know informations from like processes. Like, it's a different sort of idea. Anyway. Number 2, your narrative should focus on a single incident or event. So you need to come up with a specific instance, like the time that you learned about Instagram and you figured it out, and then you screwed up and posted something terrible and whatever. That's an incident, sort of. but what you don't want to do is just sort of be like, I learned how to use technology, and then sort of do a surface level of like how you move from not much tech to more tech, right? You want to have a specific instance or episode that you can focus on, and as you're telling it, you're sort of explaining how you are figuring things out, like how this digital world works. You might explore a positive or negative experience you've had in learning to navigate and engage with some aspect of the digital environment, and show how that experience changed the way you thought about the value and importance of digital literacy. Right? So again, that idea of changing, like maybe you think something doesn't matter, turns out you really do have to figure it out because everybody's doing this, and this is how we're going to think about it from now on, whatever it is. Or you might present a breakthrough moment in your development as a digitally literate person, explain how that moment created a new sense of yourself, right? So that idea that you figured something out, you're like capable and nothing could stop you now type thing. All right. And those are the questions. All right. Basic idea. You need to have a thesis, right, for every essay, even personal essays, and it's good to have it at the end of the introduction. And what your thesis would be for an essay like this is something about what you learned from the experience or how it changed you. So it's not, it's not a thesis. You're not arguing anything really. You're just trying to be like, because of this instance, right, I understood something else, or I thought of things slightly differently, or I had to redefine the way I thought about X. So that's what your thesis will be. Again, so you're doing a draft to post Thursday. I would say don't worry too much about the thesis right now. I'd say write 3 pages on an incident. Try to just generate content. You can figure out what the thesis really is and then clarify it and put it in, like when we do the revision. But just know that that's what the thesis is, that it's this idea that changed, something about you changed because of an event. Super basic structure for this. It's also because it's short. So we'll try the 5-paragraph essay, which is like a traditional basic, like seriously basic essay back in the day. Anyway, so you have an introduction. So you hook someone's interest right away with something like the first 2 sentences somehow, which is easier to do when you're talking about yourself, I think. Anyway, just personal essays. And then you end that introduction with a thesis statement, the insight that your story provides. You have a narrative. You're going to just try to tell a story, do a beginning, middle, end. As you're doing that, you're sort of supporting and developing whatever your thesis is, right? Because you're describing the events as they take place. You're describing your reaction to the events or your thoughts at the time, or like how you thought it would be and versus whatever. So you're doing that, boom, that's 3 paragraphs. The conclusion sort of re-emphasizes your thesis statement. Somehow returns to the hook, like it connects back with the hook. Hopefully we can do that. That's another revision thing. Just because it's like that makes your essay way more solid. Okay, so that's part 1 of it, about 2 to 3 pages. Okay, part 2 of it, using the definition from the article towards a theory of digital literacy, write a 2-page analysis of your narrative. So I just put the definition here. I mean, it's everywhere, but so which specific parts of the definition best describe your experience? And so you would identify those and explain them, right? That's how we're getting to 2 pages. What is most significant about your digital literacy, right? So the event that you had, that you went through and what you learned, what was the most significant about it? And then you also, to do an analysis paper, which is what this is, it's a brief analysis, you want to make sure you are quoting from your own essay that you wrote and then also the definition, right? So that you can be like, according to the definition, this is what let's see what I do, which is presented as a special kind of mindset that enables users to perform intuitively in digital environments. And so I put that part in. I say, and then in my story, here's where this it happened that I was now able to intuitively figure things out as opposed to having to learn them, very formally or whatever. So just remember that you're trying to quote, bring in some quotes that you, from your own essay you wrote, and then also from the definition of digital literacy.